what is taking place. Noah said the scenario, right? These two brothers, these empresarios, have people living on the land granted by Mexico. They try to force them to move off the land or repurchase it, leading to them losing their land grant and starting a rebellion. And we call this a what? What's a rebellion against your own country? A filibuster. A filibuster. Yes, Hannah? We are. Are we good? Right, which is what they're doing. Because technically, to be an empresario, you had to be a loyal Mexican citizen. So they've already taken the citizenship. This is something they should have already kind of done to get to this point. All right, let's watch this one. We're going to skip the first minute.
But fast forward a few hundred years.
It's Lumberjack Joe. Lumberjack Boy.
Old Stone Fort. It stood for over a century along the old El Camino Real trade route, serving as everything from a trading post to a hotel to a jail and even a saloon. The original was torn down in 1902, but a replica and museum now stands on the campus of SFA. The Old Stone Fort was the landmark and epicenter, and at times the most active and revolutionary place in Texas. Now, we all know about the 6 flags that have flown over Texas, but Nacogdoches actually has 9 flags, all flown over this fort. That's 3 extra, and one heck of a story. Time for a history lesson. This is Mr. Ibarbo, who built the Old Stone Fort as a loyal Spanish establishment.
¡Viva España!
However, in 1812, angry at Spain, the Gutierrez-McGee expedition came to town. They ran a green flag over the fort and declared,
Texas is free!
now they trained a pretty good army, but were eventually whomped by the Spanish. However, the fun isn't over yet. Enter Mr. James Long from Louisiana, who thought Texas should have been French and included in the Louisiana Purchase, but it definitely wasn't Spanish. So he claimed independence and declared himself president.
Hail to the chief!
But as you can guess, that didn't last long, and the fort returned safely to Spanish hands. That is until the Mexican Revolution, that eventually chased Spain off and took control of Texas.
¡Viva la Revolución a México!
And this is when our forefather Stephen F. Austin came to town. He visited the fort and decided to start settling Texas. And all was well, until 1826, when a disgruntled settler named Hayden Edwards, with about 30 of his friends, started the Fredonia Rebellion.
Texas is ours!
Well, Nacogdoches was theirs for 37 days, until Stephen F. Austin returned with the militia and he put Edwards back in his place. But then, 10 years later, a revolution happened in Texas that finally stuck. The true revolution that ended Mexican rule and founded the true Republic of Texas. Oh, that was fun. Yes, Nacogdoches played a pivotal role in Texas history.
Why did he say that was fun?
All right, and so in that one you see that they changed the flag several times, and then it gives you a little insight into this revolt. It actually it shows you, and it explains in there that Stephen F. Austin was part of putting this revolt down. All right, so let's talk about the next event that's going to lead eventually to the Texas Revolution. The Mier y Turan report or investigation. We've talked about this a couple of times through history where a country will send another representative to tour and to investigate and then report back. And this is what happens. And so Mexico is going to send this general, Jose Manuel Rafael Mier y Turan. So that's why we call him Mier y Turan. He's a very long, lengthy name. So they're going to send Mier y Turan to investigate the settlements in East Texas. Now, East Texas is where they've closed it down many a times. In that Nacogdoches area. So they send Mier y Turan to investigate, and he's going to report back a couple months later that Texas doesn't really look like the rest of Mexico. What does it look like? What do you think East Texas looks like?
Louisiana. exactly?
What does that mean? What do you think that means? It was
Desert.
like Louisiana.
There's a bunch of different cultures and like they're related. That's why it's like cultural mess.
So a cultural mess is what Anthony said. So it's got a lot of Anglo inhabitants and a lot of cultural diversity there. But do you think that it looks like the rest of Mexico
No.
and being true Mexican citizens?
No.
Do you think they're speaking Spanish? Do you think they're going to church and all the same church?
No, there's definitely a lot of problems.
A lot of different mix in there. And in fact, the report says that the Mexicans in Texas were outnumbered 10-1. That means for every one Mexican citizen, there were 10 Anglo citizens. So if we start doing the math, right, for every 2 Mexican citizens, there are 20 Anglos. 3 Mexican citizens, 30 Anglos. Now get up to the 300s and think about what Texas looks like.
Oh.
And so this made Mexico very hesitant. And also, here we go again, implanting that seed that what? Texas is not
A
loyal
citizen.
Mexican citizens. Another small event that is leading Mexico to believe this.
Now Mexico's pretty suspicious.
On the other side of this, Texas is not really acting in whole as loyal Mexican citizens. So is their fear totally wrong?
No. Yes.
Is there some warrant to their fear?
Yes.
Probably a little bit, yeah.
Well, fear unchecked leads to anger.
That is true. Good.
French Revolution perfectly. Actually, this is I like the French Revolution because when they were scared that the third estate would rise up against the government, they're like, let's kill all of them and chop off their heads off. But then someone got really mad and then they chopped the guy who led that.
And so, like Anthony's saying, when you have a central government where one person's making the decisions and they don't really check, then this is where sometimes the emotions take over and it leads to hostility or anger or an impulsive act.
Yes.
Okay, so then what's going to happen is Mexico is going to create this government, right? And they allow Texas to have what for a little while?
Freedom?
What was Texas exempt from?
Oh,
Slaves,
slaves.
okay? So we're gonna kind of all come back to this. And so Texas was exempt from slavery, but was it permanently exempt?
No.
No, it was supposed to be a temporary exemption. And eventually Texas was supposed to look like the rest of Mexico, which was what?
Slavery.
Free from slaves, right? Slavery was abolished. All right, so on April 6, 1830, there's going to be a new law that's enacted. And in this law, it's going to halt immigration into Texas. What does it mean, halt immigration into Texas?
No more. It closes the borders.
It closes the borders. It means no longer can you bring or move into Texas. The borders are no longer just wide open for you to come in, and you can't just come back and forth anymore. So if you're already in Texas, it's not as easy to go to the United States and come back, and if you're not in Texas, it's not easy anymore to get into Texas. So it's going to suspend the impresarios. So as soon as the borders are closed, what happens to the impresarios?
They're closed.
They're closed. The impresarios no longer have jobs because they no longer have people they can bring over. So this law is going to stop immigration from the United States into Texas, and it's also going to stop the impresario era. It's going to kind of immediately put a halt to it. And the impresario era was supposed to go on for another couple of years. This is going to put an end to it early, before it was supposed to end.
Is this like basically doing trafficking if you takes them into Texas?
Well, legally, right? Because Mexico wants to have people in Texas to hold on to it. But the fear of who's living in Texas is kind of backfiring on them. And they had this fear originally because remember they said no to Moses Austin, but their need for people kind of overrode their fear at the time. But now their fear is so great that they know that they can no longer leave the borders open. And so in the law, the decree of April 6th, not only do they close the border, but they start sending Mexican troops into Texas. And so now, if you're in Texas, you start to see more and more Mexican soldiers there. If you're a Texan, what does that make you feel like?
It also makes you scared. Like the fear. I wonder what this sounds like. Cough, cough, American Rebel.
Well, if I asked a couple cops to come stand in my room every day, and monitor you, how would that make you feel?
Uncomfortable.
Scared?
Safe.
Sus.
You don't
Un-
trust us?
Safe?
If
I
it's
don't
sus,
trust you?
Well, paranoid.
Paranoid, right?
Well,
How many of you would take a peek at that officer very regularly to see what they were doing and if they were watching you?
if the officers were here, that means they're here for a reason. I feel like that would also make me feel unsafe because that means that something.
I was wondering if they're
Okay.
fake officers.
So I hear a lot of
suppressors.
unsafe.
That's why I
I
said be
hear a lot
like.
of sus.
This is exactly how Texans felt, because now they feel like somebody's watching over them, and even though all these feelings that you're having are crossing through your mind, at the same time it all comes back to a feeling of, well, am I not safe? Is something going on? Am I doing something wrong? Do you not trust me? And so the fear is going to be both ways a little bit for Texans and for Mexico government. Okay, this is the last one we're going to do today. So the last event we're going to talk about today is the affair at Anahuac. And look at that word and say this word with me. Anahuac. It's kind of a funky word.
I can't even.
Alright, so this all has to do with the tax collector. So it's another representative that's sent to Texas. He's actually sent to collect taxes from the Texans. But the Texans are a little bit paranoid at this point because there's obviously Mexican soldiers that are kind of housed there in Texas now. And so Juan Davis Bradburn, who is the tax collector, is going to come into Texas, and he's going to start asking colonists to give up their slaves, and he's going to start collecting taxes. And you can imagine this does not go over well. The Texans in this area are going to refuse. They don't want to pay their taxes. They feel like Texas is kind of being burdened with, and Mexico is putting sanctions on Texas that they're not doing anywhere else. They feel like they're being targeted. And so they refuse, and this is going to cause a little bit of a skirmish. The tax collector is basically saying, look, if you buy goods from the United States, I'm going to collect more taxes from you. Why?
Because they don't
They don't
trust the
like
U.S.
Because they don't want Texas turning to who?
U.S.
They want Texas to turn to Mexico, but Mexico City and Mexico supplies are so far away that for Texans it's easier to turn to the United States. They've had a relationship with them. But now, if they buy from the United States, they're going to pay more for it.
I wonder what this sounds like.
This is actually going to lead to where we find Travis, William B. Travis, who will be the leader at the Alamo for the first time. William B. Travis, the leader to come at the Alamo, is a lawyer who's moved into Texas with a pretty bad reputation because he kind of left his family behind. Yep, and left it. He's also very notorious for kind of being smug, full of himself, and he's not really well liked at this point. But Travis comes here and hears about this, and he's a lawyer. He's going to fight on behalf of the Texans, and he's actually going to be arrested, him and his partner. They're going to be arrested for trying to fight Juan Davis Bradburn, the tax collector, and this is kind of the first time that we see Travis in the picture as a lawyer. He will go lawyer to military for Texas. He was one of the youngest colonels, yes. And so this is where we're going to stop. And so the affair at Anahuac, again, here we go again. Mexico feels like Texas is not loyal Mexican citizens, and the Texans are feeling like they're being targeted and persecuted based on the fact that they are not like Mexico. And then that's where we're going to stop today.